Black woman with a disability. Humiliated by police officer in a shopping mall, but when her son appears, something unexpected happens. Angela Williams took a deep breath as she arrived at the Westfield shopping center, a place she always considered filled with possibilities. The sun shone brightly, reflecting off the adorned windows with colorful decorations and flashing lights, reminding her that her sister's birthday was approaching. She had planned this day with care, imagining the joy aspects. However, as she approached the main entrance, her excitement gave way to a familiar frustration. Why is it so hard to find a proper ramp? She thought as she struggled to maneuver her wheelchair over a sidewalk full of potholes. The mall was bustling with people, all hurriedly engaged in their shopping. But Angela felt invisible, as if her presence went unnoticed. She paused for a moment, observing the crowd, some glancing at her with curiosity, others simply ignoring her struggle. With effort, she managed to enter the mall, but soon faced the first barrier. The glass doors weren't equipped with an automatic system, and she had to strain to open one, an act that should have been simple but turned into a daily challenge. "It's unbelievable that places like this still exist," she murmured to herself, while a few people watched with a mixture of interest and disdain. Determined not to let this get her down, Angela headed towards a gift shop, hoping to find something special. Upon entering, she was met with an uncomfortable silence. Some employees exchanged glances, but no one approached to ask if she needed help. Angela felt a weight in her chest. Maybe I should have brought someone with me, she thought. The indifference made her feel even more isolated. "Hi, can I help you with anything?" finally asked a young employee, but the lack of enthusiasm in her voice was palpable. Angela, trying to maintain her composure, replied, "I'm looking for a birthday gift for my sister. She loves handmade things." The employee nodded without much interest, vaguely pointing towards a shelf at the back of the store. After a few minutes of searching, Angela decided it was time to visit the accessible restroom. She maneuvered her chair carefully, navigating through narrow aisles and facing the lack of space that made every movement a struggle. Upon reaching the restroom door, her heart raced as she realized it was locked. She waited a moment until a man exited, but her expression quickly changed upon seeing him inside the restroom in a situation that should not have been allowed. "Excuse me, you can't be in here," Angela said, her voice trembling with indignation. The man looked at her dismissively and simply turned away, ignoring her request. "I'm going to call security," she said, starting to back away, but he just laughed, as if the situation were a joke. "You can't kick me out. This is a public place," he replied, his defiant attitude only heightening Angela's frustration. She felt tears of anger welling up in her eyes, but held them back, determined not to let the situation break her. "This is unacceptable. You need to leave right now," she insisted, but he remained unmoved. "Someone's going to come and you're going to regret this," she said, trying to keep calm, but her voice betrayed her indignation. As she waited, Angela felt invisible again, a feeling she had carried for too long. Why is it so hard for people to understand that everyone deserves respect, she thought, while trying to calm her racing heart. Angela sat in her wheelchair, staring at the accessible restroom in front of her. Frustration pulsed in her chest. There was a man inside, visibly embarrassed, completely ignoring the fact that he occupied a space that wasn't his. Indignation grew as she tried to call for security, her voice echoing in the store's quiet atmosphere. "Hey, you need to get out! This restroom is for people with disabilities," she shouted, but the man merely turned his face away as if he didn't hear her. A moment later, Officer Thomas Baker appeared, his dark blue uniform contrasting with the festive atmosphere of the mall. Upon seeing him, a mix of relief and apprehension washed over Angela. After all, he was supposed to be the one to help resolve the situation. But instead of acting as a defender of justice, Thomas began to interrogate Angela. "What's the problem here?" he asked, his expression skeptical. Angela, already exhausted, tried to explain. "I need to use the accessible restroom, but there's a man inside who shouldn't be here. He refuses to leave and I can't wait any longer." Before we continue with this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Thomas, raising an eyebrow, replied, "Can't you just go in and ask him to leave? You don't look like you're in danger." Angela's indignation exploded. "You don't understand. This restroom is designed for people like me who need accessibility. What am I supposed to do, break down the door? I'm a black woman in a wheelchair and you think that's not a problem?" Thomas crossed his arms, visibly uncomfortable. "Look, I'm just trying to understand the situation. It's not that I don't want to help, but maybe you should just be calmer. Tension filled the air. Other customers began to notice the scene, some stopping to watch, others pulling out their phones, ready to record what was happening. Angela felt exposed, as if the entire mall were witnessing her humiliation. "Calm?" she repeated, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Do you think I can just stay calm when I'm treated like I don't matter? Everyone is watching this, and you're more concerned with giving me a lesson than resolving what's happening." Murmurs in the crowd increased, and Angela felt adrenaline surging. It was as if each word from Thomas added another layer to the oppression she faced. She looked around, realizing people were starting to record the interaction. The cameras were on, and a mix of vulnerability and a spark of courage ignited within her. In that moment, as the conversation between mother and officer intensified, Michael, her son, was making his way to the shopping mall, propelled by a surge of concern. He had received a text message from Angela, and with every step, his heart raced faster. "What happened? Mom, are you okay?" he murmured to himself, quickening his pace. As he entered the store, the sight before him left him paralyzed for a moment. His mother was standing, though she looked like she was seated, facing a police officer who seemed more interested in arguing than helping. "Mom!" he shouted, pushing through the crowd. "What's going on here?" Angela turned around, her eyes shining with a mix of relief and frustration. "Michael, he's not helping. He's treating me like I don't have a right to a space that is mine." Thomas looked at Michael, a mixture of surprise and disdain on his face. "You're her son? I'm just trying to understand the situation." "Understand the situation?" Michael replied, his tone firm. "She shouldn't have to justify her need for an accessible bathroom. You're here to protect and serve, not to interrogate her." The crowd began murmuring again, the tension palpable in the air. Michael was determined not to let the situation slip away. He glanced around, noticing people with their phones out, and felt that the moment was crucial. "Mom, let's make sure this doesn't end here. We need to talk about our rights." Angela nodded, determination growing within her. Michael was right. The fight was just beginning, and they wouldn't be silenced. Michael stepped into the store with his heart racing, his eyes immediately locking onto the tense scene unfolding before him. Angela was leaning against a shelf, her expression resolute but marked by frustration and humiliation. Officer Thomas Baker, with an authoritative stance, was questioning her. Michael felt a wave of indignation rise within him as he noticed how the situation was developing. "You can't just stand here taking up space. Why don't you leave and let the bathroom be free for those who really need it?" Thomas said, his tone dripping with contempt that echoed through the store's aisles. "I just want to use the accessible bathroom. I'm waiting for security to arrive," Angela replied, trying to remain calm, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her emotional fragility. "It's not fair that I have to go through this." Michael stepped closer, his imposing presence contrasting sharply with his mother's vulnerability. "What's happening here?" he asked, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. Thomas turned to Michael, his expression dismissive. "This is a matter between me and your MID. Don't butt in. I'm her son, and I'm not going to let you treat her like this," Michael asserted, positioning himself between Angela and the officer. He looked at his mother, who seemed relieved by his presence, yet worried. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, son. I just want this to end," Angela replied, her voice choked with emotion. "You can't just ignore the accessibility laws," Michael said, turning back to Thomas. "What you're doing here is unacceptable. My mom has the right to use an accessible bathroom without being treated like a problem." Thomas crossed his arms, arrogance radiating from him. "The law doesn't apply to me when someone is causing a disturbance. She should know her place." "No, you're the one who should know your place. Your position of authority doesn't give you the right to belittle anyone," Michael shot back, his voice steady. The murmurs from the crowd began to swell, people stopping to watch the scene unfold, some already pulling out their phones to record. "Are you challenging me?" Thomas asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "You really think you can talk to me like that?" "Yes, I can. And I will keep talking until you understand that your attitude needs to change," Michael retorted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "Accessibility is not a favor. It's a right." Angela looked at her son, admiring his bravery but also worrying about how the situation was escalating. "Michael, please don't do this. It's not worth it." "It is worth it, Mum. It's worth fighting for respect, for dignity," Michael insisted, keeping his eyes fixed on Thomas. "You can't treat people like they're less than you. You don't know what you're talking about, kid. Life isn't like that," Thomas replied, the defiance in his eyes shifting to something darker. "I do know what I'm talking about, and that's why we're here. To change this," Michael said, taking a deep breath and looking around. "Look at us, all of you. This is a demonstration that we will no longer accept this kind of treatment." The crowd's attention grew. Murmurs of support began to arise. Some started shouting words of encouragement to Angela, while others cast disapproving glances at Thomas. The pressure was building, and the officer began to sense that the tide was turning. "You're alone in this, Baker," someone in the crowd shouted, and the words echoed like a rallying cry. Michael turned to the customers watching, his heart racing. "We need to unite. We need to fight against prejudice and demand accessibility for everyone, regardless of their conditions. We cannot allow indifference and discrimination to continue." Angela, still shaken, decided to stand up. "I am a mother, a woman, and an activist. I'm here to say that I will no longer stay silent. What happened here today is a reflection of what so many people face every day. We cannot accept this." Michael looked at his mother, admiring her strength. Together, they formed a powerful bond amidst the chaos. The scene was about to transform into something that no one could ignore. The fight for social justice was just beginning. Angela felt her heart racing as the scene unfolded before her. The tension in the air was thick, and Thomas Baker's disapproving gaze felt like a weight on her shoulders. She was in the accessible bathroom, feeling powerless and vulnerable, while the officer interrogated her insensitively. Indignation was rising within her, but at the same time, she struggled to remain calm. Amidst it all, Michael, her son, arrived like a ray of hope. "Who do you think you are interrogating my mother?" Michael stepped closer, his voice firm and resolute. He felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. The need to protect his mother fueled him. "She hasn't done anything wrong. You should be helping, not humiliating her." Thomas, taken aback by Michael's arrival, tried to regain control. "I'm just doing my job. I need to understand the situation," he replied, but his voice sounded defensive. He hadn't expected the situation to become so public. "Understand the situation, or are you just trying to justify your prejudice?" Michael shot back, his expression intense. "You do know that accessibility is a right guaranteed by law, right? My mom shouldn't be going through this." The eyes of the store's customers began to turn toward them. Some people pulled out their phones, already starting to record. The scene was turning into a spectacle, but Michael didn't care. He was focused on ensuring that his mother was treated with dignity. "You can't just ignore the laws that protect people with disabilities," he continued, gesturing with his hands to emphasize his words. "You know what you're doing is wrong, don't you?" Angela, who until then felt diminished, began to emotionally rise as she heard her son's courage. "Michael, she started, but he interrupted her, looking at her with an encouraging smile. "Don't worry, Mom. We're in this together. They can't silence us," said Michael, before turning his attention back to Thomas. "Do you really think you can treat my mother this way and get away with it? That's not going to happen." Thomas, feeling increasingly pressured, tried to justify himself. "I'm not trying to offend anyone. His voice faltered, and he looked around, realizing that the crowd was becoming more engaged in the situation. "Just what?" Michael challenged. "Just doing your job? Or just following orders? That's no excuse for your behavior. You have a responsibility to be an agent of change, not a perpetuator of injustices." The crowd began to murmur in support of Angela and Michael. Some people started to applaud, while others shouted words of encouragement. "This is outrageous," a woman in the crowd exclaimed. "No one should be treated like this." Angela felt a wave of energy and support that she had never experienced before. She stood a little taller, lifting her chin. "I am a strong woman, and I will not let myself be treated as if I am invisible. This needs to change, and we are here to make it happen." Thomas's expression began to shift. He could feel the pressure from the crowd and the weight of his actions. I didn't know I was causing so much harm," he finally admitted, his voice quieter. I just wanted to keep everything under control." "Control? You think controlling a situation means dehumanizing people?" Michael asked, not swayed by Thomas's weakness. "Your position doesn't give you the right to treat others with disdain. True authority comes from respect and empathy." Angela held her son's hand, feeling stronger by his side. "We are here to fight for justice and equality. We will not let you or anyone intimidate us. The change starts now, and we will be the voices that will not be silenced." As the tension eased a bit, the crowd began to unite in support. The video of this interaction, being recorded by several people, promised to become a symbol of resistance and the fight for justice. Together, Angela and Michael had become representatives of a movement that was just beginning, but already promised to make waves in society. "Let's do this," Michael said, looking at his mother. "Let's ensure that no one else goes through this. Let's be the change we want to see." And so, in a shopping mall that should have been a space of joy, a moment of resistance and transformation was about to happen, with their voices echoing for the justice they so desperately sought. Angela and Michael's story quickly spread through the media, sparking a frenzy of discussions about accessibility and prejudice. In a television studio, a prominent host prepared to discuss the situation. "Today we have the pleasure of having Angela Williams and her son, Michael, who have become symbols of resistance and change following a humiliating incident in a shopping mall in Chicago. Angela, can you tell us how it felt to see your story go viral?" Angela, still a bit nervous, took a deep breath before answering. "It was surreal. I never imagined that what happened to me would attract so much attention. I just wanted to buy a gift for my sister and ended up facing a system that seems to be against me and many other people with disabilities. I'm glad that the story has sparked a dialogue, but the humiliation I went through, that's something that doesn't easily fade away." The host nodded in empathy. "And you, Michael? What has this meant for you and your mother?" Michael, with a determined look, replied, "For me, it was a call to action. My mom has always taught me to fight for others' rights, and seeing this injustice happen to her made me realize that her fight isn't just hers. It's for all of us who face prejudice. The video going viral was just the beginning. We need to turn this indignation into real change." As the program continued, messages of support began flooding social media. Angela and Michael were inundated with comments from people thanking them for their courage and sharing their own stories of discrimination and challenges faced. One user commented, "Thank you, Angela, for showing us that we are not alone. Your voice is powerful." That night, Angela received an unexpected phone call from a disability rights organization. "Angela, we want you to participate in a roundtable on accessibility happening next week. Your experience is crucial to this conversation. Say, it's an opportunity for my voice and others to be heard," Angela replied, feeling a new sense of purpose. During the roundtable, Angela stood out, passionately sharing her story. "It's unacceptable that we are still fighting for accessibility in the 21st century. We are not invisible, we need change, and it can't wait any longer," she said as the audience applauded. Michael, watching his mother, felt immense pride. He knew the fight was far from over, but the impact they were making was already palpable. He decided it was time to take more concrete action. "Mum, I'm going to start working on a bill focused on increasing accessibility in public spaces. We need to ensure that my mother's experience isn't the experience of anyone else," he declared, determined. Angela smiled, admiring her son's determination. "That's wonderful, Michael. If we can spark this conversation, we can turn our suffering into action. Let's unite with other law students, seek support, and do whatever it takes to make these changes happen." And so, Angela and Michael's story not only resonated on social media, but also began to shape a new understanding of the fight for justice and inclusion. They became prominent voices in a cause that, while challenging, was starting to gain momentum. The struggle for social justice, which had seemed so distant, was now within reach, transforming indignation into hope and action. Tayasa, Angela and Michael were determined to turn the outrage they had generated into a real movement. After the video went viral, they decided to organize an event in the community to discuss accessibility and inclusion. The news spread quickly, and on the day of the event, the local park was filled with people of different ages and backgrounds, all united in the pursuit of social justice. Angela looked around, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Look at how many people came, Michael. This is incredible," she said, her smile lighting up her face. Michael stood beside her, holding a clipboard with notes. He was also excited, but a shadow of concern loomed over him. "Yeah, but we need to make sure the right message gets across. We can't let this just become a social event," he replied, adjusting his tie. He wanted everything to go well. As the event began, Angela stepped up to the makeshift stage, looking out at the crowd that supported her. "Thank you all for being here today. We are here to talk about accessibility and how we can work together to create a more inclusive space for everyone," she started, her voice firm and clear. The crowd applauded, and she felt the positive energy radiating from the audience. "I am the mother of a young man who is fighting for our rights. We face barriers every day, and that needs to change," Angela continued, gesturing with passion. "It's time for us to unite and demand that the voices of people with disabilities are heard. We don't want to be invisible any longer." In the back of the crowd, some familiar faces waved, but there were also many strangers who seemed moved by her words. A man in his 30s, who introduced himself as Paolo, raised his hand. "Angela, what can we do to help? What do you think is the first thing we should change?" Angela smiled, recognizing the sincerity in his voice. "First, we need to pressure local authorities to implement laws that guarantee accessibility in all public spaces. We need ramps, accessible restrooms, and more importantly, a change in mindset that sees us as an integral part of society." Michael, who stood beside her, turned to the audience, feeling it was his turn to contribute. "And let's not forget that education is key. We need to teach people about the rights of individuals with disabilities from an early age in schools. This isn't just a matter of physical accessibility, but also of respect and dignity." The crowd applauded again, and Angela felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Exactly, Michael. We need allies. We can't fight alone. All of you here have an important role in this movement." As the event progressed, stories of resilience and strength began to be shared. An elderly woman who introduced herself as Donna Lucia spoke about her experience trying to access a hospital. "I went to the hospital and the elevator wasn't working. I had to wait hours to be seen. It's unacceptable. We need to come together to change this." They applauded her, and Angela looked at her with admiration, feeling that each of her words echoed the struggle that everyone there faced. After several hours, the event concluded with a call to action. Angela and Michael invited everyone to join an accessibility committee they were forming. "Let's work together to ensure our voices are heard. Let's make our city a place where everyone can live with dignity," Michael concluded, as the audience stood and applauded. As people began to disperse, Angela felt a wave of hope. "Did you see that, Michael? We're making a difference," she said, tears in her eyes. "Yeah, Mom, but this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us," he replied, looking at the crowd that was now dispersing, but with the certainty that the fight was only just beginning. They were determined to continue, to fight for justice, and to ensure that no one else would have to go through what Angela experienced at the mall. The struggle for accessibility and inclusion was just starting, and they were ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Thomas Baker sat at his desk in the police station, his gaze lost on the computer screen. The fallout from the incident at the mall still echoed in his mind. He remembered the look of disdain and indignation that Angela and her son Michael had thrown at him, and how the crowd had turned against him. The pressure was unbearable. Despite being a police officer, an agent of the law, he felt like an outcast, a man who had failed in his duty. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on his shoulders, and the image of the woman in the wheelchair, her expression of frustration and pain, wouldn't leave his mind. "You really messed up this time, Thomas," he murmured to himself, his voice low and filled with despair. The looks from his colleagues, which had once been filled with admiration, were now filled with judgment. He remembered how, in recent days, they had whispered in corners, exchanged meaningful glances. The truth was that many of them didn't understand the gravity of what had happened. "It's just a woman with a disability," some would say. She was being dramatic. This lack of empathy only deepened his anguish. That afternoon, as he tried to focus on his duties, a longtime friend, Steve, walked into his office. "Hey, Thomas, are you okay? Everyone's talking about what happened. You need to defend yourself," he said, concern etched on his face. "Defend what, Steve? What I did was wrong. I didn't help that woman. I humiliated her," Thomas replied, his voice tense. He knew that what he had done was not just a professional failure, it was a human one. "But you can't let this bring you down. We all make mistakes. If you don't defend yourself, people will see you as a villain," Steve insisted, trying to encourage his friend. "You don't understand, Steve. I should be an example. What I did was unacceptable. That woman and her son deserved more from me," Thomas replied, his gaze drifting off once again. In the meantime, memories of his childhood began to surface in his mind. He saw himself in a small house in a poor neighborhood, surrounded by an environment where prejudice was a daily reality. His father, a very strict man, often expressed negative opinions about different people. "They're not like us, Thomas. You need to learn the difference," he would say. The boy absorbed those words without questioning, not understanding the impact they would have on his future. "You can't let what happened in your childhood define who you are now," Thomas thought, but his father's voice echoed in his mind, creating an internal conflict. He felt torn, trapped between what he had learned and who he was becoming. Why am I doing this? Why can't I leave this prejudice behind? He questioned himself. At that moment, he decided he needed help. He grabbed his cell phone and called a friend from the police academy, someone who had always been more open and understanding about social issues. "Hey Marcus, can you come over? We need to talk. I need to understand this better," he said, his voice heavy with concern. Marcus arrived quickly. "What's going on, Thomas? You look like a ghost," he said, noticing the anguished expression on his friend's face. "I did something terrible, Marcus. A mistake I can't get out of my head. I humiliated a woman at the mall and now everyone is talking about me. I feel like I've lost my integrity," Thomas confessed, his voice trembling. "You have to look at it differently. What you did was wrong, yes, but it doesn't define who you are. What matters now is what you'll do with this. You can change. You can make a difference," Marcus encouraged, his voice firm and confident. "And what if I can't? What if I keep being this person I don't want to be?" Thomas asked, a mix of despair and hope in his eyes. "Then you fight. You learn. You become an advocate for change. Each of us has the capacity to transform, Thomas. You just need to want it. And it starts now," Marcus replied, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder, a gesture of support that Thomas desperately needed. With those words, Thomas felt a spark of hope ignite within him. He knew the struggle wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to change. The image of Angela and Michael was still fresh in his mind, but now it was accompanied by a new perspective, a path toward redemption and action. Angela was nervous but resolute. The community meeting she and Michael had organized to propose the creation of an accessibility committee in the city was an important step in the fight for social justice. The auditorium was packed with people from diverse backgrounds, all united by the desire for change. Angela looked at the audience, feeling the energy and anticipation in the air. Michael, beside her, surveyed the room. He knew that the presence of Thomas Baker, the officer who had humiliated his mother, could complicate things. Although most were there to support the cause, the tension in the air was palpable. When Thomas entered, the murmurs intensified. He looked thinner, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of guilt was crushing him. Angela took a deep breath, determined not to let the past hold her back. "Good evening, everyone," Angela began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "We are here today to discuss something that affects us all. Accessibility is not just an issue of infrastructure. It's about dignity and respect. Each of us deserves to access public spaces without facing physical or social barriers." As she spoke, Thomas positioned himself in a corner of the room, silently observing. He felt the wary looks from some community members, feeling like an intruder, but there was a flame of determination in Angela that made him want to step forward. After the presentation, as the audience began to ask questions, Thomas raised his hand. "Can I speak?" he asked, his voice hesitant. The room fell silent, and Angela felt her heart race. She didn't want Thomas to derail the meeting, but she knew he had a role to play. "My name is Thomas Baker," he started, "and I'm the officer who interacted with Angela that day at the mall. I would like to publicly apologize. My actions were unacceptable, and I failed to see the situation from her perspective." Murmurs began again, but Angela gestured for silence. "If you wish to apologize, Thomas, that's a step. However, we need to understand that this isn't just about you. It's about the ongoing fight for justice and inclusion." Thomas nodded, his face pale. "I know I failed. I let my prejudices interfere with my duty to protect and serve. I grew up in an environment where prejudice was normalized, and I didn't realize how wrong that was. I truly want to change, but I don't know how." "Maybe you can start by listening," suggested Michael, calmly but firmly. "We can't change the past, but we can work together to ensure others don't go through what my mother went through." Angela looked at Thomas, a mix of anger and understanding in her heart. "You have to understand, Thomas, that your actions have consequences. Your position of authority should not be used to intimidate, but to support. Change begins with humility and recognition of mistakes." Thomas, visibly emotional, looked into Angela's eyes. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to learn. If you give me a chance, I want to become an advocate for accessibility within the police force. I want to help ensure this doesn't happen again." The audience began to murmur, some looking surprised, others skeptical. Angela raised her hand again, asking for Essie. "If you are truly committed to changing, then let's work together. But remember, change isn't easy and will require ongoing effort from all of us." "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," Thomas affirmed, his voice trembling. "I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Angela looked at the audience, seeking support. "If we accept Thomas's proposal, we need to ensure transparency and accountability. This must be a genuine partnership." Hearing this, some community members began to nod, while others murmured in agreement. Angela felt a slight sense of relief. The road ahead was still uncertain, but perhaps it was possible to build a bridge, even between those who seemed so far apart. "Let's meet again to discuss how we can formalize this collaboration," Angela concluded, looking at Thomas. "If we are truly committed, we can make a difference." And in that moment, a new possibility began to emerge, one that could unite voices in the pursuit of justice and inclusion. Angela and Michael were in the community's meeting room, surrounded by residents eager for change. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a palpable sense of expectation in the air. Thomas Baker, the officer who had disrespected Angela, was present, and the tension grew with his mere presence. Angela glanced at Michael, who looked apprehensive, but she felt it was time to give transformation a chance. "Thank you all for being here today," Angela began, her voice steady. "We are here to discuss accessibility in our city, and as you know, this fight is personal for me. But today we have an opportunity to turn our experiences into action." Thomas, standing next to her, felt the weight of the gazes upon him. He knew that his presence was controversial, but he also understood that he needed to face it head-on. I know that my presence here might be seen as an affront," he began, his hands trembling slightly, "but I want to learn. I want to do better." The murmurs in the room grew, and Michael crossed his arms, skeptical. "You want to do better, Thomas? How can we trust you after what happened?" "I understand your distrust," Thomas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But what I did was unacceptable. I grew up in an environment that taught me to view people in the wrong way, and I let that affect my work. But today I'm here to apologize and to commit to being part of the solution." Angela looked at him, weighing his words. "Are you really willing to change? That means not just apologizing, but actively working to ensure that other officers understand the importance of accessibility." "Yes," Thomas said, sincerity in his eyes. "I want to propose a training program for the police on diversity and inclusion. I want my colleagues to understand the struggles that people like you face every day." The room fell silent, each person pondering the proposal. Angela saw a glimmer of hope and decided to give Thomas a chance. "If you genuinely want to do this, we need you to be transparent and honest throughout the process. This isn't just about you, it's about the lives you impact." "I promise I will be," he replied, determination resonating in his voice. "If I can make a difference in one person's life, that will already be a step in the right direction." Michael remained skeptical, but his mother's determination inspired him. "If you want to do this, Thomas, then show your willingness. We're not here to accept empty apologies. We need concrete actions." Angela nodded, agreeing with her son. "Let's create an accessibility committee, and you can be part of it. But you will need to work directly with the affected communities. This means listening and learning, not just talking." Thomas felt a weight on his shoulders, but also a sense of relief. "I accept. I want to hear your stories, understand the challenges you face. I'm ready for this journey." With the proposal in motion, the discussion began to flow. Angela and Thomas outlined a preliminary draft of the program, including workshops on empathy and real-life experiences of people with disabilities. Enthusiasm began to grow in the room as people started to speak up, sharing their experiences and suggesting ideas. "We could include sessions on effective communication with people with disabilities," suggested a woman from the audience, "and also practical training on how to handle CRISI. This will help build a bridge between the community and the police." Michael, noticing the change in atmosphere, began to feel more optimistic. "And we also need a feedback system where people can report their experiences with the police, so we can monitor the effectiveness of the program." The room started to buzz with new ideas and a sense of unity. Angela realized that even amid a complicated situation, there was room for hope and change. Together, with Thomas by their side, they were starting a new chapter of dialogue and action. "Let's work together," Angela said, her smile firm. "This is the true essence of social justice. What began as a confrontation can transform into a powerful movement." And so the unexpected collaboration began to take shape, heralding a future that, while full of challenges, was also rich with promises of change and inclusion. The atmosphere was tense in the conference room of the Westfield Shopping Centre, where Thomas Baker was preparing to present the awareness program on accessibility he had developed in collaboration with Angela and Michael. The room was packed with community members, activists and police representatives, all waiting to hear the news. However, an air of distrust hung in the atmosphere. Thomas was nervous. He knew his credibility was on the line. As he organized his notes, a local reporter entered the room holding a tablet. "Sorry to interrupt, but did you see this?" The man approached Thomas, showing him a video that had quickly spread across social media. The image was clear, an old video of Thomas at a community event, making derogatory comments about people with disabilities. The tone of his voice was arrogant, and his words echoed with prejudice. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. "That's a low blow." Angela's voice cut through the silence, her tone firm and determined. "You can't simply ignore your past, Thomas. Change is a process, but you need to be honest about who you were." Thomas felt his face burn with shame. I'm not that person anymore," he stammered, searching for words that could explain his past behavior. "I was wrong, and I'm trying to do the right thing now." "Errors can be forgiven, but change needs to be genuine," Michael said, crossing his arms in a sign of distrust. "We know you're trying, but what you did cannot be erased. The community needs actions, not just words." The indignation in the room was palpable. Some community members began to murmur, while others filmed the discussion with their cell phones. The tension escalated, and Thomas realized the situation was slipping from his control. "I want to redeem myself," he said, raising his voice. "I want to work with you to make a real difference. Please give me a chance." But Angela was not willing to make it easy. "You can't expect people to just trust you, Thomas. We need transparency. We need you to show not just with words, but with concrete actions that you are committed to change." "I will submit to any type of training you think is necessary," Thomas pleaded. "I can bring in experts on diversity and inclusion for the police. We can create a training program for all officers." "That's still not enough," Michael said, looking directly into Thomas's eyes. "You need to understand that while you seek your forgiveness, the people you disdained are still struggling daily. This fight isn't just yours. It's all of ours." In the back of the room, a woman raised her hand. "I'm the mother of a child with a disability," she said, her voice trembling. "I've seen how you treated Angela, and now this video. How can I trust a police officer who once scorned the fight we face every day?" Thomas felt his stomach twist. He knew that words weren't enough, but the weight of responsibility pushed him forward. "I understand. I can't apologize for the things I've done, but I can commit to being a voice within the police to ensure that none of this happens again. I want to work with you, not against you." Angela sighed, feeling the pressure of the moment. "Let's do this. If you're truly committed, then propose a timeline and clear actions. We want to see tangible results." "Yes, I agree," said Michael, his expression still serious. "Otherwise, this conversation will just be empty words." The press conference ended with Thomas's promise to present a detailed plan the following week. Angela and Michael left the room reflecting on what had just happened. Thomas's words still echoed in their minds, but doubt lingered. Angela knew that the fight for justice was a long and difficult road, but it was also a necessary one. As they walked out of the mall, Angela turned to Michael. "Do you think he can really change?" "I don't know," Michael replied, looking out at the horizon. "But if he's willing to try, maybe there's hope. Change starts with the first step, even if that first step is small." "Yes," Angela agreed, "and we'll be here to ensure he doesn't give up." With a mixed feeling of hope and caution, mother and son moved away, ready to continue their fight for a more just and accessible world. We've reached the end of this moving story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more accounts like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Right now there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to keep watching these touching stories, just click on it and you'll start watching. Now, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from and leave your like to support our work. And now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to know your opinion. Until the next video.